All right, good afternoon. Welcome to the official Draft Night podcast.
Woo!
We have a name. We're recording this. It is Wednesday, February 26th. So, plan for the day. We are going to talk something besides Mavericks basketball. We're going to start off with covering last night's game, the first meeting between Luka and the Mavs, and then we are going to do a little bit of Stars talk. We'll talk about the Cowboys offseason so far, give our thoughts on a couple of things there, and then a quick preview of baseball and what that's going to look like. So I think that's going to be really, really fun, and we'll get into that towards the end. So that's the plan. Now, being the Draft Night podcast, I think we should talk beer. So that is the plan going forward. We're going to highlight to the extent that we can local beers, local brews, local breweries, and let you know what it is that we're sipping on, what it is that we're digging, give out some recommendations, shout out the great work that's happening out in the DFW brewery scene. I'm really proud of our brewery scene and the work that we do here. So to that end, what are you drinking, Brandon?
So today, it's a little bit warmer today, so I am going with a Community Honey Citrus Blonde. It's nice, light, and refreshing, and I mean, this is a spring drink, man. We are on the cusp of just beautiful weather every day. I think we got a little bit of a dip next week, and then of course, who knows? There's always going to be that one or two random freezes between now and April, but I am so looking forward to golf weather and beer on the patio, barbecue, and
Amen.
just everything that the spring brings because my happy place is out on the back porch just hanging out. And we're basically there right now, but we got a little ways to go.
So the honey citrus blonde, what is that thing running alcohol wise? 6%?
This is 6%.
Okay. How would you describe the taste of that bad boy?
I mean, light, refreshing. Like this is something that normally if I'm going to be in a pool or in the lake, I'm drinking seltzers all day long. But if there was a beer
Same.
option, something like this is very similar to like Love Street by Carbach. Very, very similar kind of flavor profile, but the citrus is first. The honey, the blonde is really kind of the middle, the meat of it once you get the flavor. And then the back end is the honey. And it's just a super easy drink, low IBU, decent ABV, and all things to say, it's a pretty tasty beer that you could pound.
Love that. So honey citrus blonde is one of my favorites to grab down at the AAC when I'm attending a Mavs or Stars game. Um, Great beer, right? It has just a touch of sweetness, and it is, in my opinion, very, very crushable. So I was just down there at the community brewery, not too far from the AAC, actually, just south of I-35. What an awesome spot. First of all, just a massive, massive, brand new facility. And so it's really, really cool. They got indoor, outdoor options, right? Plenty of space outside with giant tables. There were dogs everywhere. So really cool place to bring your family, bring your pet. It's a really family friendly place. So we went out there this past weekend, spent an afternoon enjoying this beautiful weather. And so we were outside on the patio playing some games, crushing some of their other beers that they have out there. Great recommendation.
Yeah, well, and to kind of touch on what you just said about the outdoors, the dogs. I mean, that's one of my favorite things about living here in DFW is there's no shortage of amazing breweries and fun, even though the breweries are relatively family friendly. I mean, like Rollertown, who's in Salina now, but they're moving to Frisco with their brand new complex. They should be opening in the summertime. If you go to the other side of the world in Fort Worth, you got Martin House that always has amazing activities. McKinney has Tups. Even downtown Frisco now also has Three Empires, a little bit smaller but still great vibe. I mean, everybody's got different events, whether it's trivia night, whether it's music, live karaoke, whatever. It's such an easy date night, and I just love the exposure that we have with everything. What are you drinking?
So I have, and I did not bring the can with me, but this is obviously a very dark. I'm still stocked up on plenty of dark beer, so I need to. Not only am I going to drink all of this, but I need to go grab some more before it runs out. Right? So this is Oak Highlands Brewery Vanilla Porter. It's about 6%, and so I mean it is just perfect. Like from here on out, we're going to have a lot of, beautiful sunny afternoons. And then, sun goes down, gets a little bit chilly outside. Maybe you put on that sweater or, grab a blanket or whatever. But still hanging out outside by the pool, or maybe cooking up some barbecue, something like that. Perfect. So at 6%, it's not extremely heavy. It's not like super packed with chocolate or coffee or any of that. This is definitely on the lighter side. So you can drink a few of these without feeling super bloated, without feeling like you just took down 2,000 calories. So that's the reason why I love it. But it's still really flavor forward. Still warms you up. Highly recommend. I have not actually. I passed by it. I have not actually been to Oak Highlands Brewery. Have you? Okay, definitely a place I want to check out. I know it's right there, kind of Lake Highlands, Dallas Richardson border. It's just south of 635. I have some buddies that go and absolutely love it out there. So I'm gonna try and make it a point of emphasis to head out there, grab some brews, check the place out, and hopefully I can come rep them on a future pod. But yeah, I'm so excited for some of the beers and some of the breweries that we're going to highlight in the future because I think there's some real not only are there the well-known ones, but there's a lot of hidden gems out there for sure. Okay, so the last week has been a week of growth, doing some really exciting things, right? Finally settled on the name, building out some of our other media channels via socials. We're working on some stuff for podcasts. We've had a lot of really awesome engagement. People commenting on the pod, people subscribing, people texting me, giving us ideas for content, asking to come on. So just thank you. Like that means the world in terms of building momentum and feeling like we're building something really cool here that's really inclusive. So just a big thank you from my end. Is there anyone in particular you want to shout out?
Yeah, I really want to shout out Daniel Kravchenko. I put a challenge to him that we are trying to get as many subs as possible. And this is a guy that if you give him a side quest, he will not drop everything he's doing, but pretty damn close. And so it was 2 nights ago. I said, hey, we're trying to get to 500 as fast as we can on YouTube. He's like, where are you at now? I told him, he's like, all right, give me a second. And so he got us 35 new subs in, I don't know, 20 minutes just for making some calls. And so big thank you and shout out to Daniel Kravchenko for being that guy because that was really, really awesome. I mean, today after our networking meeting that I had at the bar with one of the other people in the group, and he's a huge Mavs fan. And I told him about the podcast, so he immediately subscribed, and we talked in depth. And I was like, "Man, you're definitely someone that we need to get on the show at some point to be a guest because he knows the stuff. He's been a fan since Reunion Arena days, and so I think he'd be a really good guest in the future. And you mentioned all the platforms, so we've got Facebook, of course, YouTube, TikTok, Instagram, Spotify, and then I will be working on any other platforms that we can, so like Apple Podcasts and any other podcast streaming services. So I'm hoping within the next week, everything should be up and running, and we should have no lack of exposure on all platforms.
Awesome. Okay. I mean, at the end of the day, just a big thank you. So let's get into it. Luka faced off against the Mavs last night for the first time. That's probably the biggest story, certainly in Dallas, really across the NBA for the past few days. Everyone's talking about it. Um, so let's get into it. How were you feeling leading up to yesterday's game? And then once the action started, who were you rooting for? How were you emotionally? What was it like for you?
Yeah, so it sucked that it was in LA because it was 9 o'clock tip, which means we had to wait
Yeah.
even longer for the game to come around. And so I was just anxious, excited because this is such an important game for me as a fan. Because to your question about who was I rooting for, I was rooting for Luka to just do well. And so, I mean, he came out he was cold from three the entire game, but that's kind of been him for the last little bit. He's always had a streaky three ball career, but he's been pretty low on percentage recently. But it was just really fun to watch him, and it felt really, really weird rooting for him to get good outlets and like find LeBron in the post and drive the paint. And when he got teed up in that very first quarter on what was a really bad no call, and I don't think he really yelled at the ref too bad. I was yelling at the ref because, he didn't deserve the tee. He deserved the foul called on the shot. So it was so bizarre being in a position that I found myself, while I'm rooting for Luka, ultimately I'm rooting for the Lakers. And there's never been a time in my life that I've ever done that or thought I would ever do that. But Luka, he did exactly what I thought he would do. He did a triple double, a little bit lighter on points, and maybe I initially thought. I thought he'd be in the 30s, but that's okay. I think he's going to save the big ball in for the return game here in April. What about you? How did you handle yesterday in the game?
So in the lead up to it, I thought you hit the nail on the head when you said the 9 o'clock tip sucks, right? So that's always been the case, but especially I felt like yesterday afternoon just dragged, right? I know me and you were texting a little bit, but it was almost like we were just waiting, like we were waiting to be hit by a tsunami. Like we were just like, just passing time, just trying to get to tip off. But it wasn't like, when it's been in the past when we're waiting for like a playoff game or something, right? Where it's like, you're feeling the nerves, there's a nervous energy, there's anticipation, there's excitement. This was the opposite of that, but it's really hard to describe. It's almost like I was waiting for the game to start. I was kind of dreading it. I was kind of, maybe the right word is like intrigued more than anything, just to see how this was going to play out and what he was going to do, what the reactions were going to be, how the players, right? How was Luka going to interact with Kai and the rest of the Mavs and the coaching staff, right? So yeah, it was really really strange. It just kind of all hit me again emotionally because it was very much a real thing, but this made it even more real. It's like, oh shit, we're facing off against him. It was never supposed to be like this. So that was the lead up to the game. Once the game actually started, I thought he was really going to press. I thought he was really going to try to put on a show. And I kind of felt like that would mess up his game a little bit. And I figured Jason Kidd would definitely throw some doubles and triples at him if he started getting hot. I figured they didn't want to get embarrassed. They would say, okay, if he gets hot, we'll throw a double at him. We'll make somebody else beat us. And that's what Jason did, right? He started sending a little bit more help. He started sending him different looks as the game progressed, getting the ball out of his hands, forcing him to make passes. And to Luka's credit, that's exactly what he did, right? He picked apart the Mavs defense. He was the facilitator. He was hitting open guys. And so he was content, I thought, just to beat us. It wasn't, you could tell at first he was trying to put on a show, but then all the talk the past few years about how ball dominant Luka is, I think at the end of the day, Luka's just he's a basketball player, right? He's not Kobe Bryant. I don't think he necessarily wants to put on 50, 30, 40, 50 points a game. I think his natural state is more of a distributor. He's just, since he's gotten to the NBA, he's been forced to be more of a scorer, right? Just because that's what the Mavs needed, and that's kind of, his stardom exploded, and then that role just kind of necessitated him taking on more of that scoring load. But yeah, it was a really strange game, kind of like you. I was rooting for Luka, right? Like that was my interest. So I did get into the game because Kai, he was on a heater, man.
Yes.
Going 3 for 3 with the Lakers, and he was magnificent. And so, I was having fun, watching Kai too, but I was rooting for that. And then, so in the first quarter, I think, so Luka gets on a heater, right? He starts kind of taking over the game. He hits that three, turns around, stares down the
Yeah.
Mavs bench. What was
Oh,
that like for you?
man, you just see him because he doesn't even really show like a bunch of emotion. Like he didn't give
No.
his normal like loud like big mouth scream that he does when he's really pumped up. It was just a you guys messed up. Like this is what you let walk out the door for pennies on the dollar. Okay,
Yeah.
just remember that. And so, but yeah, to your point, facilitating. His court vision to find open looks is insane because there's a one pass. I think I texted you and I said that was filthy. It was he was driving from the top of the arc, going into the paint, and then just flips one right behind his back. He clearly knew the guy was there because he saw him when he drove in, but
Yeah.
none of the defense was collapsing on Luka in the paint. And it was just a no look, perfect dime that ended in a splashy three. And it was like that moment of, oh my God, that was amazing. That's what he used to do for us.
Yeah.
And then I got mad. So it went from excitement to sad to angry in just the snap of a finger because we know that that's now forever gone and there's no chance of Luka probably ever coming back. Luka Magic is dead in Dallas.
You brought up that moment. I wanted to talk about it too because so Luca makes the pass, and immediately, what do you hear from the crowd? You just hear ooh, like the crowd was stunned, and I immediately just got really sad, right? Because I was like, those are our moments, right? Like that's our pass, right? Like we've seen that so many times, and to see another crowd, get the benefit of that now, it just freaking sucks, man.
Not just another crowd, the Laker crowd.
Oh, I know.
It's depressing. But you know what? Luca I mean, I will always be a Luka fan, and I guess this is kind of like how the LeBron fans were whenever he left Cleveland and took his talents to South Beach. I imagine that's how they kind of felt as well. And I never really understood following a player, so it's different and interesting to be have my feet in those shoes, looking at it from the other side of it, knowing or understanding finally why the Cleveland fans follow LeBron to Miami and then to ultimately to LA. So I get it now because I'll always be a Luka fan. I will probably watch as many games as I can, especially if they're good games, and I'll probably always find myself rooting for him to some degree. I don't love it, but I will.
Yeah, I think that's a good point to bring up because I've seen a lot of people, especially on Twitter, be really critical of people that have admitted the same thing, that they're still going to be a fan of Luka, that they're going to watch Laker games, people that were quote unquote rooting for the Lakers last night, which I guess I would include myself in that, right? Not necessarily rooting for the Lakers, but I wanted Luka to do well, right? So kind of in association was rooting for the Lakers. But there's a lot of people that are being really insensitive about that to other fans, being critical of their fandoms and saying, oh, well, just go be a Lakers fan, or you were never a true fan at all in the beginning, stuff like that, right? And what I would say to that is like, just mind your own business. There's people that are going through a lot, right? Emotionally processing a lot. And I think, to just be really insensitive to that fact is that doesn't do anybody any good. And nobody chose this, right? Like this was just dumped on us, right? So people are gonna take as much time as it takes to process it and figure out what they need to figure out. And I think we just be respectful of that. So um, my big takeaway from last night's game was that the big losers from that game were Mavs fans, right? Because our team lost. I wouldn't say Luka destroyed us. He had a good game. He did what he had to do, but he didn't humiliate Nico, which I think a lot of us wanted. And now we just have to move forward with an injured team that is sitting in eighth place, right? That's going to find it a really hard path to get to the playoffs. And that's what I felt. That's what I went to bed feeling like we're the losers in all of this, which is kind of how I felt since the trade went down.
Speaking of losers, you said the man's name, Nico. He was in the stands last night. He was at the
Mhm.
game. What are your thoughts on Nico being in the stadium, how the fans received him, the chants that were being made?
I loved it. Um, I am so, I don't want to say proud of the Lakers fans, but I just think it speaks to the absurdity of the situation that that there are fans saying that chanting "Thank you, Nico." That is how absurd this trade is, um, and it's hilarious to me that not only is he hated in our arena, right, but the guy can't go to SMU games. Now he can't go to Laker games. This is following him right wherever he goes. And so, I don't know. I assume, Luka doing push-ups is very intentional, right? I've never seen him do that in any of the other warm-up.
No.
So, that is one thing, maybe the tiny, tiny, and I know you're the king of silver linings, so you'll probably have a bigger one than this, but that is the tiny, tiny silver lining of last night's game. It's like this continues to follow and haunt Nico, even to the point that you saw the fans right behind him holding up the sign that said, has the X, so where the loyalty never fades away. So if there's one thing that I can take as a positive, it was that.
Yeah, so we've talked about this ad nauseum, but one of the main reasons that Nico says Luca was gone away is because of his weight and his conditioning and everything about him regarding that. When Luca left just over 3 weeks ago, or just about 3 weeks ago, he allegedly was in the 270 to 280 range. That man didn't look. He looked like a pretty good 230 at the absolute top. So how does one lose 40 pounds, 30, 40 pounds in a 2.5, 3 week turnaround?
Yeah, I want to address this head on because I saw today yet again another freaking story in the media breaking about the Mavs being unhappy with Luka smoking hookah and drinking beer. And I'm just so done with this story. Like, I'm like, what? You're still leaking stuff to the media 3 weeks later, even though this has been a complete PR disaster for your organization, right? A complete PR cluster, and you're still doing it, right? This BS has to stop. Like it it's infuriating that the day after this I wake up and that's the story because it's just old. Stop trashing the guy. Just own up to it. Like you wanted AD, you thought Luka was done. Okay, well, live with the consequences, right? So that's one. But we all know, like, there's been enough information that's come out about this. We know the real reason. We know it's because Nico, he wants to be the star of the show. He didn't want the organization to revolve around Luka, so he got rid of him. So he traded him. So just own up to it, right? Stop with all of this hookah BS, beer. Like, the dude was averaging a triple double on his way to the finals last year. Just stop, right? That's where I'm at with it. This just needs to stop.
But unfortunately, it's not going to, because my opinion of this is the media has pressed this so hard, the smear campaign, that now they're just like turning into the skid. Like they cannot overcorrect what happened because they've launched such a massive campaign that they've just got to stay on it to make it look like there's, I don't know if it's a saving face or that they're not changing their story. I don't know, but that's the way that I'm reading it, because I agree with you. Having another story weeks down the road after he's gone, it doesn't do any good to perpetuate what they think may or may not be with his conditioning. And it's just silly. But you know what? It doesn't matter anymore because he's gone. He's got a new team. He is off minutes restriction. He looks comfortable. He is facilitating like a good point guard does. He is scoring still. He's still doing triple doubles. I mean, it it's just there's not. I'm getting worked up. Hang on, let me take a deep breath here. There's nothing
Take a
else
sip,
that can.
man.
There's nothing else out. You know what? Breath and sip. Good idea. There's nothing else that can be done about this other than embrace the change. Understand that moving forward, we have to make do with what we have, with the injuries, with 80s uncertainty, with everything else that comes with the cards we've been dealt. And frankly, I think, like I said last week, I don't see us going deep into the playoffs, but seeing PJ back out there, seeing Dwight Powell for what it's worth back out there, seeing Kyrie put on an absolute show last night, seeing Clay finally get hot from three. I've been That's what I've been waiting on since he came over, is him to actually hit some three balls and in succession. I think he hit three in a row, especially if Dante Exum's going to keep just jacking up garbage from beyond the arc. Um, so I'm happy. I don't have a silver lining for this, Ron. I really don't, other than the fact that I'm still going to watch the games. I'm still going to hope for the best. I'm still going to root on Luka, and that's all I can do.
Okay. I I was in the arena on Friday for the first game post All-Star break, and so I have a couple of Mavs games before then, and then we can get in, I think, a little bit more into kind of the post Luka era.
Sounds good.
Um, Switching gears here. So for the first time, we're gonna talk something non-Mavs, non-Luka. Let's hop over to the Stars. Um, so I'm not gonna lie, I completely put this segment on you, Brent. All you, take it away.
Yeah, no problem. I mean, I like hockey. Out of the major sports that are out there, it's definitely not on the top of my radar, but it still is fun to watch. I definitely, just like soccer, much prefer to see them in person. How electric the game is so much fun,
Agreed.
especially when there's fights. It's such a different sport from everything else. It's just such a change of pace from what we're used to. So that's what really draws me to hockey. But, right now is a really good time to be a hockey fan. And we talked about this, I think, on the very first episode, that if we're not going to be in huge support of the Mavericks at the AAC, we might as well flip to the off days of Mavericks and root for the Stars, because they are doing really, really good. They've got a couple injuries. They've just made a big trade. Their last game was a 6-4 loss to the Blue Jackets, and Jamie Benn and Robertson both looked great. We had goals from some other guys too, but just couldn't pull off the win, which is fine. We're still in second place, which I think is going to be a great lead into the finals run, because I do think that with the depth that we have and the trade that was just made for some extra defense and an extra forward, I think we're going to be really good moving on. Plus, Jake Ottinger, the goalie, this dude is so much fun to watch. He just never loses composure. He's always willing to just put himself out there and take as much heat as he can. And his glove is just incredible. So I'm super, super excited to see what happens as we continue through the rest of the season into the playoffs, because while I think the Mavericks have an early exit, I think the Stars go deep. I think the key players that we got to kind of keep an eye out for are going to be Roberts. He continues to be incredibly pivotal in what the Stars are trying to do. He recently had a hat trick against the Islanders, and he added a goal against the Blue Jackets, like I said earlier. So he's got 24 total goals this season, which I think is nothing to sneeze at. And he's really just kind of a cornerstone for this offense. He's had his third consecutive multi-point game, and he had an assist against the Devils. So his offensive consistency is there. He just had an injury that he had in January, so he's coming back, but he's still been contributing offensively at a high level. And I think that as long as those guys, including Jamie Benn, continue to do what they do from an offensive standpoint, I don't see any issues. Defensively, we're pretty good. Like I said, they just got a new defenseman that they just brought in on trade. Trade deadline's in March, so it's coming up. They do have some long-term injuries that have sidelined people like Sagan that allows the salary cap to move and free up for the trade deadline. So I think they've got like 11 or 12 million dollars leading up to that point that they can potentially bolster the roster even further. Which, I mean, who knows what's available, who they're going to go after, but they've at least got some room to get some new guys to really kind of further the cause to get a deep run into the playoffs. But I mentioned some injuries about Tyler Sagan. He had hip surgery in December, so he's going to be back 4 to 6 months. He might be back for the playoffs, and if that happens, then that just absolutely helps our cause to make a deep playoff run and get to the Stanley Cup again. There's a couple other minor injuries, but nothing crazy. He's a defenseman. He had an upper body injury. He's out probably for the rest of the season, so we don't have to worry about him. But as far as standings go, like I said, we're second. We are right out of first place. It is going to be super, super close here pretty soon. There's just a few games that are going to make that difference to getting us the number one seed. Like I said, as long as we stay with the offensive production that we've had, I don't think we have any issues of really dropping too far. As far as the Western Conference is concerned, the top three teams are kind of all the same as far as total efficiency and just what they bring to the table. So it's going to be good. The Avalanche, they're close pursuit. They're trying to get a better seed, and I think they got a chance to. I think we're going to have a deep playoff run between our forwards and our defense and Ottinger's goaltending. We've got, I think, the perfect balance to be as elite as it gets in the NHL. Injuries, of course, have impacted us, like I said, but I think with the trades we've had have bolstered that. So the trade deadline is going to be interesting. We'll see what comes, but that's my quick breakdown on what the Stars state of the union is right now and what they have in the next coming games until the playoffs. Anything to add, sir?
Yeah, I mean, first of all, awesome breakdown. But number two, I thought about just trying to do like a quick crash course in the Dallas Stars and, doing a ton of studying and watching a ton of tape and then coming in here and trying to talk Stars, kind of toe to toe with you. I decided against that. So I think it might actually be more interesting. Maybe other people come on this Stars journey with me. And so, I've always kind of lightly followed the Stars. I've been to several games. Usually I'm tuning in on, once the playoffs start. But I've always had a ton of fun, right? The games are awesome. So much fun to go to. And so I think now's the time for me to take a dive into the deep end and really start following along more closely. So that's going to be kind of my role in this. So I'm going to start watching some games. I'm going to come on to these pods and probably say some really stupid stuff and not know what I'm talking about. But I think that's kind of part of the fun. So that's my plan. So yeah, I'm going to try and bring something from my noob point of view to every episode going forward.
Well, I think that's actually a lot of fun to your point about bringing on someone to join that journey with you because we've got plenty of people in our personal network that are massive Stars fans. We even know someone who happens to be part of the Stars organization. So we might be able to bring them on to do a little guest spot whenever we've got a sport that neither of us are super efficient on. I'm cool with that. Bring them on, give them a full segment to talk and bring a little bit extra value that maybe we don't have the opportunity to give. So I think that's a great idea. Also, I do want to point out, so with certain beers that have heavy wheat content, which Honey Citrus Blonde is a lighter wheat content, I tend to get red right around the eyelid. So as you can see, I'm getting a little blushy right here and right here. So we'll see how intense that gets through the remainder of the show. I can't
Wait,
drink
why is that?
It's something in the wheat. Hefeweizens, any sort of heavy wheat beer, it doesn't. So this is a very light wheat beer, so I can handle this. But like if I drink a Blue Moon or like a Leinenkugel or any really strong Hefeweizen, I am screwed. My body heats up, my face turns red. I normally have to kick my shoes off to help expel some heat. It's a whole thing. So that's why I tend to stay with darker beers or seltzers because I don't experience that with them. So, anyways, hey, there's a little bit of scientific breakdown on Brandon's face.
Dude, what the hell? Have you gone to a doctor, right? Or are you just like, this is just the way I am, I'll live
It,
with it?
it just happens. It's like an allergy or an intolerance or something, but it's anything with wheat. So, oh well.
Okay.
It ain't gonna stop me from drinking it.
So that was Brandon's weekly body corner,
Yep.
uh, where he
The
talks
more
about
you know.
his aging, middle-aged man bod.
First of all, shots fired.
Okay, so that's stars. Now we're going to get into DFW's favorite topic. Yes, the star. The Dallas Cowboys are in the midst of the offseason. Things are going to start ramping up here as we start getting into draft season. So it's been no doubt, as Cowboys offseasons tend to be, there's been plenty of news. So I want to start off with the coaching search, if you want to call it that, that kind of kicked off this whole offseason. So let's just start there. Take me through what your thoughts were on the search, on who we ended up with, and on the outgoing coach, and what's your outlook on this staff?
I never liked the Mike McCarthy pickup to begin with. My family on my wife's side is big Green Bay fans, so I've watched Mike McCarthy and his entire run there. So I was no stranger to his coaching style, his lack of clock management, his inability to use challenges properly. I'm familiar with that. So I wasn't pleased with that pickup, but I thought, you know what? He's won a Super Bowl and we haven't had a coach on our staff in a while that had won a Super Bowl. So I thought maybe, you know what, let's give the guy a shot. All things considered, his win loss record was still on the positive side, despite being, in the Jerry Jones football organization. He still did an okay job in the grand scheme of things. Do we have any wins to show for it? No, but I'm also a firm believer that we will not win any Super Bowls as long as Jerry Jones is still the general manager in name. So that was a whole fail in itself. And of course, McCarthy wanted a longer term than what the Cowboys were offering, so he inevitably walked. Coaching search was laughable. They didn't try to get anybody. They waited and waited and waited. There were people like Aaron Glenn that were available. Saleh, who was the former Dolphins coach, that was available. There were some other big names that were out there that got picked up super fast because the Cowboys waited. And I don't know if that was intentional, if I don't know what, but they picked freaking Schottenheimer, who's never been a head coach, whose offenses have never really been prolific, powerful, or notable to any degree. So I don't really understand what the purpose of bringing him is, unless, and you ready for my tinfoil hat? Unless they want to tank this season, fire Schottenheimer, wait for Dion to open up as a availability from Colorado, get Dion and then draft Arch Manning. That's the only thing, and that is going out on the longest, thinnest of possible limbs. I don't think that's even remotely a possibility, but I don't get the pick. I don't understand it, other than the fact that he's very Jason Garrett like, where he's low personality, even keel, probably a pretty good yes man, isn't going to argue with Jerry, isn't going to bitch about draft picks or players brought in or players leaving. He's just going to go along to get along. That's my thought on why they chose him. Outside of that, I don't really get, because the coaching staff I'm okay with, but below him. So they got Eberflus, right, from Chicago. So good
Yep.
defensive guy. And then they got the old offensive coordinator from Arizona. Can't remember his name off the top of my head. They picked him up, but his stats for the offensive line were great. He was top 5 in the league on pass protection, run protection, and overall pretty good offensive coach. So I think if the coordinators are doing their job, I think we'll be fine. I just don't know who's going to be calling the plays. Is it Schottenheimer? Is it somebody else? Is it the quarterback coach? I don't know. Are they going to let Dak have full reins of the offense? The Cowboys seem to do their best when Dak can run a hurry up or a quick tempo offense and call his own plays. And like I said, it doesn't really matter because we're not going to win anything. So it doesn't matter. It just doesn't matter.
Yeah. I was not a fan of the McCarthy hire either. I was actually really, really critical of it at the time. When we made the hire, I can't freaking find it. Thanks a lot, Elon. But was not a fan. The problems you mentioned were definitely there. The clock management. I don't totally think he gave you any sort of like week to week major advantage.
Hmm.
Um, and so, and some of the stuff he did was just weird, right? He was like, okay, I'm gonna run Kellen Moore out of town so we can run the damn ball more, I think was his exact quote. And then nothing really changed, right? This year we didn't run the ball until long after it was way too late. Um, but once I want to talk about the piece where it seemed like the Cowboys' plan initially was to bring him back.
McCarthy,
Yes.
I think it initially was, but he wanted a long-term deal, and the Cowboys didn't want that.
Okay. So had I known if I knew that was the case going into the offseason, right? My belief was that McCarthy would have folded, right? He would have accepted. I don't know what Jerry wanted to offer him. Maybe it was like a 2 year deal. I assumed he would have just folded to accepted the 2 year deal and moved on because I didn't think that any of the other open jobs. He didn't seem to be a great fit for any of those. Um, Now, but that's not what happened, right? He essentially said, "Hey, okay, you want to give me a 2 year deal? I'm sick of this shit already. I'm out." Right? That's how it came across to me. Is that what you took from it?
I mean, because he's not even going to coach this season. I thought I remember hearing that,
Right.
so I just verified that. And so he's not even going to take any sort of coaching job this season. He's going to take the year off. But yeah, I do believe Jerry offered a 2 year. I'd have to verify that, and he wanted a 5 year contract because I think he knows he's at the tail end of his career. He probably wants to retire sooner rather than later. He's been at this for a really long time. So I don't know if we're going to have any major drop off though, losing him. I really don't. But you mentioned Kellen Moore a while ago, and I do want to touch on that. How frustrated are you that Kellen Moore goes to the Eagles and just absolutely crushed it? I mean, he was with the Chargers the year before that, but he was with the Eagles this last year, and he did a phenomenal job calling plays. They end up winning a Super Bowl. I
Yeah.
mean, what does that make you think whenever you sit back and evaluate the decisions this organization's made from coaching staffs, letting people go, and what they've done since?
Yeah. Yeah. So essentially, Jerry chose McCarthy over Kellen Moore, right? And then the very next season, he chooses McCarthy over Dan Quinn. And then the very next season, McCarthy's gone, and Dan Quinn is facing Kellen Moore in the NFC Championship game, which the Cowboys haven't made since what, 1996. So it turned out to be a blessing in disguise for those two guys, right? They're probably like, thank God I got out of that hellhole. And so you saw, I wanted Dan Quinn to be the head coach more so than I did Kellen Moore. So I was more upset when he was let go. It did not surprise me in the least that he had the success that he did in Washington. I think he's a phenomenal coach. I think he's a phenomenal offensive coordinator. I'm not sure if he has the intangibles, to really lead a locker room. We'll see. But yeah, I mean, it speaks to the lack of direction of this organization that you have two very, very capable coordinators and you let them go in favor of McCarthy, who's gone a year later. That is terrible, terrible strategy.
Yeah, I agree regarding the NFC Championship. I cannot explain how I wasn't even mad. I was just sad that both of our offensive and defensive coordinators from the year prior are facing off to set stage for the biggest game of the season. And not only that, but like the Commanders, they also had a few of our key parts, like Tyler Biadasz, our center, goes to the Commanders and does a great job, which
Several defensive pieces.
several defense pieces. Yeah, exactly. And so the question is, were they just not good enough here? Are they that much better there? How big of a piece is the coaching in general? Or to go back to kind of what happened in the offseason and from the Cowboys locker room, is it a cultural issue within the Dallas Cowboys organization, the practice facility?
Yeah. I think it speaks volumes that, I knew this was going to happen, right? As soon as it was clear that McCarthy wasn't coming back, I told the people around me, I'm like, they're going to bring on some retread. It's going to be Ron Rivera or Leslie Frazier or somebody like that, right? I'm like, that's what they're going to do. I already know they're not going to be in the running for the elite head coaching candidates. You mentioned one, Aaron Glenn. I really like Ben Johnson. Who at the time was Detroit's OC, and they didn't. I don't. I know they didn't talk to Ben Johnson. I don't think they talked to Aaron Glenn either, right? I was like, they're not even in the running,
It
and
was too
it's
late.
not even. And it's not even that. It's not even that Jerry doesn't want to talk to those guys. Those guys aren't interested in the Cowboys. So what does that say? You asked this question about culture and about how different it is being a head coach at the Star versus other organizations. I think that tells you all you need to know, right? These guys that are the elite guys that everybody wants, that they can go wherever they want, right? They can hold out and wait for their job of choice. They don't even view the Cowboys as an option, right? You're supposed to be America's team, the elite of the elite, but the elite don't want you, right? What does that say about the state of the organization and where the organization is and how it's viewed by the serious people in your profession? I think it speaks volumes.
But at the end of the day, you know what, Ron? It doesn't freaking matter because the Cowboys are still the most valuable franchise of any sport
Right.
in the world. That's not
Right.
going to stop anytime soon. And as long as Jerry Jones prints money, it doesn't matter what he tells the public about wanting to win and wanting to be great and get back to the Super Bowl.
Yeah, he's very successful from a business standpoint, even if not from a football standpoint. And to that end, I do want to take a second here and talk to the Cowboys fans. Um, because in a lot of ways, I hate to say it, but I have to be completely honest, right? We deserve the bad rep that we get from the rest of the NFL, right?
Yep.
There, people hate the Cowboys. It's not because of the team, it's because of the fans. And we keep showing up, right? Cowboys fans travel. Everybody knows that, right? And we're walking into these other stadiums like we have a chip on our shoulder. We have some great legacy that we're walking in with. And we go in there like we own the place and we continue to support this team that more and more as time passes, it's clear they don't deserve it, right? Every NFC team besides the Cowboys has been to the NFC Championship since the last time the Cowboys went. We have nothing to brag about. I don't like getting into these conversations when people are like, oh, kiss the rings or whatever. We have nothing this century. We are one of the worst teams in pro sports in terms of playoff victories this century in my lifetime. So we have to get with the new reality. It's not the 90s anymore. We have to get with this new reality that we're not an elite franchise from a football perspective. And I think the way that we associate and the way that we support and the way that we treat the Cowboys financially needs to start replicating that. And that's the only way that something's going to change. Ultimately, I don't think that's going to happen. People are going to keep going to the games. The season tickets are all going to sell out. And I just don't think things are going to change while the Joneses are in control.
But there's one more factor in all that, and I could not agree more. But there's one piece that you didn't account for, and you said Cowboys fans travel. Well, other teams travel here too, their fans. So like I went to the Houston game this year, and it was 75% red and blue. It
Mm-hmm.
was home field advantage Houston
I remember
Texans.
that.
It was bizarre being in that stadium, being surrounded. I mean, we were surrounded by nothing but Texans fans. And that was an ass whipping of a game, too. So, as
It
the
was.
third quarter was coming to a close, Cowboys fans were already filtering out. So now that went from three-quarters of the stadium being Texans fans to closer to seven eighths, getting close to only Houston Texans fans. And all those Texans fans that came to that game that day, they paid for tickets in Jerry Stadium, which lined his pocket. So even if Cowboys fans decide not to show up, that might devalue the ticket a little bit, which means the opposing team fans are going to come in bigger droves, which is still going to pay Jerry Jones, and that's all he cares about.
Yeah, I'm right there with you. And so there's been some other weird things that have happened so far in the offseason. Not long after the Luka trade, the Cowboys leaked that they're considering trading Micah Parsons. We have the draft coming up. I imagine we'll get deeper into what the Cowboys need or what we want them to try and pick up in the draft and in free agency to bolster the team. Any other major offseason things that are on your mind?
No, but the Micah trade's interesting, or at least the rumors. I don't think that the Cowboys have any interest in trading Micah Parsons. What I think is the Mavericks were controlling the sports news cycle here in DFW way too big and way too long. And Jerry said, how can I pivot and be the center of attention here. Hey, someone leaked that we want to trade Micah, because that's on par with being a franchise generational player like Luka was for the Mavs, and then that generates more publicity towards the Cowboys. I don't think there's any chance that the Cowboys trade Micah. I think that was just a publicity stunt to get more ears and eyes on the Dallas Cowboys organization and maybe direct off of the Mavericks. Let me say this: if they do trade him, I think it'll be a Herschel Walker type pull.
Yeah.
I think we'll get lots of picks, lots of players, and I think it could be one of the biggest trades of the century. Will it happen? No, I don't think so.
Yeah, I'm not as sure, but there seems to be a sentiment among the players that they're kind of tired of this crap already, right? So Jerry lets that leak, and then I know CeeDee Lamb, right? He commented on the trade and just said, "Hey, like enough of this is enough." Like I think the players are starting to get fed up, at least the ones that care about winning. There's some cracks showing where they're like, "Man, we're just kind of tired of this circus." Like stop with these BS negotiations where Jerry wants to drag it out, right? And he thinks he's the king of negotiating, and then all of a sudden the player gets a record-setting contract. They're tired of this, right? This whole dog and pony show. I'm tired of it too. I'm on the side of the players. Like, let's stop with all the leaks and let's just do football. But never going to happen. I think next week we start getting into some players, right? Let's start talking draft, what we want to see them take. See if there's any potential free agent options. Obviously, the Cowboys dropped the bargain bin, so that's where we'll be looking. But we can
Yeah.
get into that.
I have no faith in their ability to get players in the offseason, and I'll highlight one, then we can move on to the next segment. Derrick Henry last season, they had every chance to get to Derrick Henry, and Derrick Henry said they didn't call. I would have picked up, I would have answered, we would have had a conversation. Instead, they decide that, what's a better choice than Derrick Henry? Why not Ezekiel Elliott? Sure, that makes so much sense. Based on that one interchange with players, it just re-solidified my knowledge that the Cowboys have no ability to manage not only the front office decisions, but also the player personnel. But let's move past the Cowboys. Let's jump into where Ron and I are finally going to have a disagreement on sports, because I'm personally a fan of teams that don't cheat. Ron tends to like baseball teams who cheat. So why don't you tell me about your love for the Astros, Ronald?
Yeah. So you forgot to mention this, but I tend to be a fan of teams that have multiple rings. So I'll give a brief backstory on my kind of Astros fandom, how that came to be, because the other sports I am Dallas 100%, but the Astros are a little bit different. So I started watching baseball. Actually, my dad got me into it, and it was actually the first sport that I really followed. Right, so I was probably 12, 13 years old. This was around 03, 04. So the Astros weren't even in the AL back then. They were still in the NL, and they were facing off against the St. Louis Cardinals. So I have a lot of family. My family actually originates in St. Louis, and actually helped build one of the stadium prior to this where the Cardinals
Really?
played. Yes. So deep roots. I have a cousin who is a super fan. He's been on television multiple times. He has so much memorabilia and artifacts, and so he's really clued into the history. So my dad, he was watching all these playoff series, but living in South Texas when they were playing the Astros, I was like, well, the Astros are the closest team to me. So I became a fan, not just because of that, because I love the players, right? So back then it was Jeff Bagwell, and we had the Rocket, Roger Clemens was pitching for us, Andy Pettit, Roy Oswalt, Craig Biggio, all those guys, right? And so I became fans of them as baseball players, and I had a ton of fun, right? And so there was a couple years there in a row where we played the Cardinals. And so it was really fun watching those games with my dad and going back and forth, and we'd have our battles. And so a lot of good memories there that I still look fondly back on. And so that's how it started. Um, and so I've been a fan ever since. And then, I never expected we'd move to the AL, right? To the same division as the Rangers. Prior to that happening, right? So back during the playoff runs in 2010, 2011, I was rooting for the Rangers, right? One of them was against the Cardinals, as you all will remember. One of the ones you choked.
Please don't
Uh,
talk about
So, I still honestly don't see it as a rivalry. We just haven't played enough, right? And especially in the postseason, we have one series. So I still don't hate the Rangers. But man, y'all have a little brother syndrome where y'all are constantly coming at me. So I'm going to defend myself, right? And we're going to continue to cook. And so I think we're going to have a ton of fun this year talking about both teams. just, being here and being engraved in the sports scene, I think I'm pretty knowledgeable about the Rangers. So hopefully, that's more pertinent, obviously, to people here in DFW. So I think we can have really good conversations about the Rangers. And then whenever the Astros come to town or the Rangers go down to Houston, I think we can have some really fun kind of rivalry moments there too. So I'm really, really excited about this upcoming season.
I am too, and the Rangers made some moves in pitching. We lost Scherzer, so they had
Mm-hmm.
to fortify the starting pitching staff. But our 1 through 3 on the starters, I'm really excited about. I mean, Eovaldi last year was just nails the entire time. DeGrom is always good, and then John Gray, I think, is going to be another really good piece, being that third starter. The relievers, I mean, we got a lot of really good guys that are in the bullpen between Latz and Webb and Dunning. And I think Chris Martin, a new closer that came from the Red Sox, I think he's going to be a really good piece to really put away games that are close. Hopefully, we don't have to get too deep into the pen on most games. I'm hoping our starters will do their job and get some good quality starts. But it's, as Ron Washington said, that's the way baseball go, and you never really know what you're going to get. But regarding the actual lineup, I'm really really excited about this year because it's pretty much the same lineup as last year with two
Yeah.
exceptions. That's Jake Berger at first base and then Jock Peterson who came in. But I mean, Jonah Heim, I think, is prepared and prepped and ready to have an incredible bounce back year. I think we can all agree he was underwhelming last season from the catcher position. I think his bat's going to be significantly better this year. And I think defensively as a catcher, he's grown as well. So I really like that. And then Simeon, Young, Steger, that part of the lineup is so exciting because we know what Seager
Yeah.
can do. He can jack a ball at any point in time. Simeon's going to get on base. So I think that 5-hole spot for Seager is so good because he's going to really be able to clean up the bases, get some runs early. And then the back end of the lineup between Langford, the young kid Carter, who's so much fun to watch out there in the outfield, and Adalis Garcia, who, I mean, who has a better smile than that dude? When you watch him, you get excited, you get happy, and then Jock Peterson at the bottom of the lineup. While there's not a ton of variation from last season, there's still a ton of strength. There's a ton of compatibility with the infield and how they're going to play. So I have nothing but high hopes for this season. What's
Well,
your
I think,
Astros break?
yeah, I mean, I think so. To comment on what you said, I think just from an injury alert perspective, you guys are going to pick up. You should be a better team. I did want to ask because I've been following, obviously, Carter and Wyatt Langford, two recent, very high draft capital guys. Are they both? Obviously, I think Carter is. Is Langford expected to be in the lineup, and what do you expect from him this season?
Yeah, he should be a starter. He is right after Seager in the lineup. So he's in the 6 hole, and I think that that's a good middle end, back end of the lineup for him. Evan Carter's a speedster, so as long as even if Corey Seager doesn't hit a home run every time he's at the plate, he'll at least still be able to be on base. Carter can bat him around. While the offensive side I think is going to be good, I'm a little more excited about the defensive side of the infield and the outfield play because there's some fast guys, especially in the outfield between Langford and Carter. They're young, they're fast, they've got range, they've got length, they can jump. I think you're going to see some good Sports Center top 10 moments out of that outfield this season.
Okay. So in comparison to what the Astros have done in the offseason, I think it's been there's no doubt you can't call it a win. There's a lot of unhappy people in the fan base, unhappy folks in Houston. We traded away Kyle Tucker. He was a giant part of the offense, right? A rising star, in my opinion. And so we got some interesting guys back for him, but to lose him and to lose Alex Bregman in the same offseason, there's no way around it. They're not going to have the same kind of firepower that they've had in past seasons. I think it's realistic to expect somewhat of a drop in terms of offensive output. Um, so it'll be interesting to see how some of the replacement guys come in and how well they're able to step in and fill those roles. But those are two elite level players, and so I don't think they're quite up to par in terms of competing with a team like the Rangers. Just from a lineup standpoint, from an offensive standpoint, they can't fuck with them. There's no doubt about it. And you look at the pitching staff. Verlander's gone, right? So he went back out west. So you're going to have Valdez kind of leading the lineup. And so, right now it looks like a bunch of B-level guys, right, are going to be filling out the rotation. So, you don't really have that 1-2 punch that we're used to having in Houston, right? You used to have whether it was Verlander and Keuchel, or even in recent years, right, where you had Verlander, Valdez, and Lance McCullers hasn't been a factor in years, and he's still eating a big chunk of their salary. So it's kind of overall, I think, kind of an in-between year for the Astros, right? I don't know that they're playoff contenders, but they're definitely not the favorites to lead the division. We'll see what they want to do from a trade standpoint, from a free agency standpoint, but they need to start rebuilding the farm system. It's been so depleted, right? They traded away their picks for years to add major league guys to continue to compete. They got docked, by MLB during the scandal. They lost some draft picks that way. So they need to start rebuilding that farm system because their guys, the main guys are old, right? Altuve, maybe he has 3 or 4 years left. So, anywhere from the pitching staff, some of their other players are going to be around a while. So if you look at the rest of the lineup, but I mean, in the outfield, you have no star power left. Kyle Tucker was your main guy. Before that, it was George Springer. Um, so it is a question mark in terms of how you're going to generate offense on a night in, night out basis. Hopefully, you get good years from Jeremy Pena, but they're talking about starting guys like Jonathan Singleton, right? Or the guy that they got in the trade for the Tucker trade, Isaac Paredes at third base. So there's a lot of question marks. Maybe these guys come through, maybe they don't. So, but I don't expect them to compete with the top of the division this year, unfortunately. So it's a transitionary period for sure.
So it's a tough division anyways. You can never count out the A's because you never know how they're going to be. So I think this divisional race will be fun. I really hope the Rangers have a good season. I think they're going to have a good one. We'll have to see. The ABS system is now in place for challenging pitches if they're inside outside, if the batter doesn't agree. So I think that is a huge improvement for this season. So we'll see how that plays out through the year. It's Technology's been in existence for a while. It's no different than tennis and how they, measure if a ball is in or out. Now it's just being applied to, the Angel Hernandezes of the world that are horrible behind the plate. Thank God he's gone. But anyway, no, I'm really excited for baseball. I'm of course excited for football as it comes because no matter how bad I know we're going to be, I'm still a Dallas Cowboy fan and I always will be. So anything else you want to talk about baseball?
I don't think so. We're a couple weeks away from the season kicking off, so we'll obviously continue to ramp up as we approach. I just looked it up, so it looks like the first series between the Astros and Rangers will be mid-May, starting May 15th, 16th, 17th, and 18th. So we got a 4-game series. The Astros will be in Arlington. I think it would be awesome if we can maybe get some tickets, or I would love to get down to one of those games.
I'm sure we can make that happen.
All right. I think in terms of wrapping up, this was our first pod, kind of touching on all of the Dallas major sports. I had fun. This is probably the general structure that we'll have going forward. Any specific topics, we want people to send those in. Let us know what you want us to be touching on. We're getting closer to bringing on guests. We should have some news to break on that soon. To people that want to come on, let us know if you have a favorite topic. You want to talk baseball, or you want to talk spring training, or you want to talk football, whatever it is, right? You want to talk draft. Just know, right? So we'd love to start thinking about how to bring some people on and getting those things scheduled. New social media coming out by the time we release next week's episode. If not this week, we should be able to be on podcast platform, right? So we're looking at Spotify. I'd like to get us on YouTube Music as well. And did I miss anything?
No, I think that's it. Yeah, we'll be on all platforms as soon as we can get them done. We're improving on production quality as we go, whether that's in a podcast studio or better equipment at home, but that's all going to come with time. So this is unfortunately a chicken or egg situation with how that all plays out with viewership and everything that comes along with that. But the future is bright. I think we got a lot of really good things to talk about within DFW Sports, and then we've also talked about other things like cinema, TV, and everything else. But like I've been working on a catchphrase for the new show name of how to sign off. You
Okay, this
ready?
is new. Yes.
Thanks so much for joining Draft Night. The next round's on us.
I love it,
Of
man.
course, I'll leave that up to the fans if they got any fun catchphrases they want to throw out. I'm always up to suggestions. I love plays on words. I love anything that is topical and fun. But I thought I really liked that one. So, Ron, if you got anything you've been brainstorming,
No, man, I didn't know we were doing this.
that's my job. Just get used to it. I'm a story topper and a one upper everywhere I go. I can't help it.
Okay, so that's my homework. I'm gonna think of some catchphrases to one up Brandon. Thanks again. to everyone that tuned in, for all you guys' support, and we will catch up with you next week. See y'all.
Thank you, everybody.